שלום לכולם. טוב, היו פה קצת דרמות קודם. אנחנו עכשיו, אני מקווה שיהיה לנו מושב מעניין, אבל לא דרמטי. אני אזמין את הדוברים הנהדרים שיש לנו עכשיו לבמה, ורק אגיד שהפאנל הזה הולך כולו להתנהל באנגלית. גם את הדוברים והדוברות אני עכשיו אציג אחד באנגלית. אז נתחיל, עושים סוויץ'. I want to invite to the stage our distinguished speakers for the panel on regional cooperations, challenges and opportunities in the Middle East and Europe. First of all, Gidon Brumberg, CEO Israel of EcoPeace Middle East. Veronica Ertol, Director Regional Program on Energy, Security and Climate Change in the Middle East and North Africa at the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. Professor Iris Visoli-Fisher of the Institute for Desert Research and the School for Sustainability and Climate Change here at Ben-Gurion University. Hi. Mr. Hans Doctor, the Ambassador of the Netherlands to Israel. And Guy Yavin, Investment Director at Doral Energy Tech Ventures. So, this microphone actually is stronger. I need to speak a little softer with this one. So, hello everyone, and we're going to talk today about challenges and opportunities, risks and threats, and we're going to examine the issue of climate resilience through a regional perspective. We'll start with Israel and its immediate neighbors, then we'll enlarge the picture a little bit, to the broader Middle East, and finally we'll even go to Europe, if we may. Gidon, I want to start with you. And you've been dealing with these issues for many years and leading some interesting initiatives. One of them made a lot of headlines in the past year, and I think it really shows the potential for regional cooperation. If you can talk a bit about that.
Thank you very much. So I refuse to be depressed. Depression is not a strategy. We need to pick ourselves up, and we need to move forward in every way that we can. And climate resilience gives us that opportunity, because climate resilience can never be Israel alone. We're not an island, and even if we were an island, the climate crisis wouldn't help us. We're completely dependent on our neighbors for climate resilience. And therefore, as President Herzog said in his speech, so forcefully, regional cooperation, regional cooperation, regional cooperation. In fact, at Sharm, his speech was all about a renewable Middle East. And a renewable Middle East requires cooperation between Israel and her neighbors and with Europe. And that's why this session is so important, because there's a clear linkage with what's going on in Europe and the Russian war against Ukraine and the call of Europe, and particularly the President of the European Commission, to repower Europe. And the Repower Europe plan is a renewable energy plan. And we in Israel and the Middle East can capitalize on that opportunity to build resilience for ourselves that we desperately need, but also to work with Europe to build that healthy interdependency between Israel, Middle East, Europe. And I want to highlight 4 opportunities, and I'm going to be very, very quick.
Very brief. Listen, I'm going to be the bad cop today. I apologize to all our great panelists.
So firstly, it's about harnessing the sun and the sea. And harnessing the sun and the sea, one of the outcomes that Amir speaks to is Project Prosperity, where Jordan utilizes its comparative advantage of vast desert areas to produce renewable energy that Israel also needs. Israel will buy that renewable energy not as a favor, but because it's the cheapest renewable energy available to us, in addition to our own need to produce renewable energy at home. And on the other hand, Israel, as we heard from Mekarot, is a world leader in desalination, while the rest of the region is dry. And Palestinians and Jordanians do not have 24/7 water. And that is not how we create regional resilience. So, first of all, the fair share, but in addition, producing water through harnessing the sun and the sea are critical means of building regional resilience. But it's not only sun and sea. It's also the sun and the wind, and here we see interconnectors moving forward, linking Israel, Cyprus, and Europe for the movement of renewable energy to Europe. We see also interconnectors between Africa, between Egypt and Crete and Europe. We need to build on that. We need to build on the ability to produce green hydrogen because of our vast desert areas, also to export to Europe. And finally, we need to also build on the sand. We're blessed with sun and with sand, yet we don't produce any solar cells in our own region. We're all dependent on the import of solar cells from China. If there's one lesson we need to learn from Europe's experience with Russia, is that we can never be dependent on another monopoly power. Here we need European leadership, we need American leadership to help our own region use the sand that we have to produce our own solar cells and not allow the trap, the disaster that Europe fell into with Russian gas. I leave it there.
Okay, thank you. Strong opening statement. We have on this stage, a diplomat and a researcher and NGO and private business. So we really have a wide perspective on this, and I would like each one of you to talk about these regional opportunities and the risks and the difficulties from your own perspective. Iris, I want to turn to you now because we heard Gideon talk on the one hand about a successful initiative involving Israel and Jordan. On the other hand, there are also difficulties that come from political realities in the region. How do those two things play out? Everybody jumps with a microphone.
Does this one work? Yes.
Yes, it does. Okay, all yours.
So I work on solar energy, conversion and storage. And from my point of view, energy would be the most important issue when it comes to climate change and dealing with climate issues and the changing world. And the way, in my view, to build a stable energy market in this region would be by collaborating with other countries. Because to deal with the challenges of the energy market, which are security, sustainability, and affordability, you can overcome all these challenges if you work with our neighbors. For example, you mentioned solar and wind. For solar and wind, you need area. Israel is a very small country, but if you look around us, there's a lot of desert areas just around us in Jordan and in Egypt that can be used just for that. And the entire region can build on the collaboration between technologies developed in Israel and vacant land that is just waiting there to be used. If we want to make a better energy security in this area, we probably want to increase the power grid. Israel currently is an energy island which supplies its energy internally, but it's not connected to any other grid. If the grid fails in Israel, there will be no electricity to any of us. If we could increase the grid, the way it's done in Europe, for example, we could improve the energy security to all of us and to the entire region. And bottom line, if we could do that, we could achieve the emission reduction that we're all looking for, concurrently with improving the life all around us. And civil stability is what we need in this area.
If it was only that easy. But yeah, definitely interesting and important words. Mr. Ambassador, I want to turn to you. You know, the question I would love to ask you, not for this panel, how do you explain these days to your government what's happening here in Israel? But I'll keep that for a separate discussion.
No, I mean, I'm happy to say something about it because it's linked. It's about priorities. When you look at Israel and what Israel has been going through over the last years, it's been so internally focused and not dealing with the real threats around it. And climate is one of them, but of course also the problem with the Palestinian is another thing. And you cannot say it's not connected because these regional initiatives would move much faster if those issues were resolved. So
it's difficult to have a regional cooperation when you cannot cooperate within your own country.
Well, exactly, and if other countries are concerned about that. So if you really want to work on the things that matter, you have to solve this and not let it just simmer, and that's what's been happening. And then the other thing is, very interesting parallel. In the Netherlands, the court system has really forced the government to adopt more climate-friendly policies because the politics of the day led to coalitions not taking measures that they had committed themselves to and had written into law. So the court system actually forced us to take certain measures. So also, that issue is very important if you want to tackle climate change. You have to have a government that is focused on the issues that truly matter. You have to have a functioning rule of law. Otherwise, you won't be able to attract the investment, and you won't have anyone holding government to account. So it's really vital that these things are tackled.
This is a great diplomatic situation because you answered my question, which was what can Israel learn from the Netherlands, before I even asked it. So thank you for that, Mr. Ambassador. Veronica, I want to turn to you. Your organization works all across the region, and I think you came here this weekend from North Africa, from Morocco. Can you talk a bit about what makes cooperations in the regional level work and what makes them fail when we try to tackle the big issues that the ambassador just spoke about, and the fact that it is really a problem that everyone shares together?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it works, right? Yeah. I think what I'm going to say is echoing a lot of what has already been said. I think it's clear that the potential for cooperation in the region is there. It's clear for everybody that it's necessary to work together to solve the challenges that we see in terms of climate and energy. So why are we not doing it? And I think the big, unfortunate answer to that is it's a lack of political will on a lot of sides. Maybe that's also a bit of an easy answer because I don't have the solution to it. I don't have the solution of how we create this political will on all sides that is necessary. But I think that is the big point of why these things fail. Because we see that when the political will is there, look at the agreement that we have just seen between Lebanon and Israel on the demarcation of a sea border. Who would have thought that these two countries can come to an agreement like that? But the necessity was there, the political will was there, so it happened. So I think this is the big thing. And then, of course, there are a lot of other things, maybe just two in terms of time. I think one is really taking a look at the realistic potentials of each country. Not only the natural precondition of wind and sun, but also political conditions, investment conditions, to really see what can be done by each country and where the synergies lie. I think that's an important point as well. And the third point, and it's always a bit of a thorny issue, is of course finance. I think that's where the private sector comes in. It won't be possible to do that just with public money. States will not have all the necessary finance for this. But of course, the states also have an important role to leverage funding and to motivate the private sector and to provide a framework where that is possible as well. So maybe just as 3 points for now.
Interesting food for thought. Thank you, Veronica. And you mentioned the private sector, so we move to you, Guy. First of all, if you can speak briefly about Doral, your company, and what it does, and then give us a little bit of a perspective from the private sector, from the world of investments, how these regional and multinational cooperations come into place and what impact do they have?
Sure. So Doral Energy Tech Venture is the corporate VC and innovation arm of Doral Group. Doral Group is a global renewable energy developer, develops around 20 gigawatt of renewable energy assets, solar, wind, biogas storage in the US, in Israel, and in Europe. And when Doral Tech Venture was established at the end of 2020, I want to highlight three of the main objectives we had. The first one is to make sure that the projects of Doral Group will be embedded with the most innovative and advanced technologies in order to increase yields and efficiency of our project. Second, to have like long view to future technologies which we can implement in our seek for energy transition to renewables and green energy. And third, to expand our global relations with corporations and technologies. And as been said among previous speakers here, technology is one of the key, new technology is one of the key, major key aspects of how we achieve and tackle climate change and global warming. But according to many articles, these technologies, most of them have not been developed or commercialized yet. And in order to facilitate that, many players and global players have to collaborate together. And it starts from academia, when most of the IP starts and grows. And then governmental and private money, either from VCs or private equity, need to be contributed to these ventures. And corporate VC need to support it and back it with finance, but also with alpha site and pilot site, and give market perspective, and then banks and insurance company to make these technologies bankable.
Sounds very simple so far.
Yeah, very simple. So you need to collaborate, and not necessarily a solution that fits to Israel is being developed in Israel. It can be developed in the US, in Europe, in other countries in the region. And in order to do that, we need to build, ideally for each of these startups or technology, we need to build a broad syndicate of investors who can contribute for that. So I can give an example for one of the companies who invested in the US, Sand Elements. This is a company that do recycling of lithium-ion batteries and produce active materials for new batteries. This company, when we invested 2 years ago, we invested with TDK, which owns CATL, one of the largest battery manufacturers in the world. Jaguar Land Rover, which is a vehicle OEM. They have a lot of feedstock of end-of-life batteries. Orbia, which has a lot of chemical working, and others. And of course us, that we have a lot of storage facilities. Only in Israel we're going to install 1.5 gigawatts of batteries in the next following years, and we don't want to take one problem that we solve with this battery, right? It's an enabler for renewable energy penetration. 20 years from now, 25 years.
You have a new problem.
Right, so we want to find a sustainable way to recycle those. And this company, with the great team and the work they did with the investor, recently just raised additional $300 million from others. And we speak about regional. Part of the new investor is the Oman Investment Authority, but also other great investors. And yeah, this company, I think they couldn't succeed without this support with the entire ecosystem.
So you see the US and Israel and Oman and others. It's an interesting picture. Thank you. I'm going to change the order a bit, although everyone will get another chance to speak. Iris, following on what we heard from Guy on the private sector, if you could talk a bit about the role of academia and the research world in finding these multinational, regional solutions, where does the academic world get into this picture?
Well, scientific research is, in essence, an international theme. Scientists all around the world work on similar problems, especially in my field. And when I go to conferences, I meet people from all around the world, including Europe and the US, and, but also the Middle East and North Africa region. And we build ties. And if you were talking about political will is a top-down business where countries talk to each other and make agreements, but bottom up, you can have people talking to each other. And scientists that meet on neutral grounds, like conferences, can talk to each other. And so it happens that I go to a conference and I present my research, and someone comes up to me and tells me this wonderful stories of his own research and what a wonderful lab he has, and he says, well, let's collaborate, we can work so wonderfully together. And I look at his badge and I see that he's working at KAUST, and KAUST is in Saudi Arabia, and I said, you know what, scientifically it makes a lot of sense, but honestly, I couldn't come and visit your lab. And
for now.
For now. But on the other hand, I also get to meet people from countries which are formally allowed to host me, like the countries like Jordan and Egypt, where Israel has peace agreements with, and the Abraham Accords has vastly forwarded that. And recently, a group of 33 Israeli researchers from 6 different academic institutions has formed a consortium to study renewable energy conversion and storage with 20 researchers from Morocco, from 12 different academic institutions in Morocco. And just next month, we're going to travel to Morocco and meet with them and establish collaboration. We have students from Morocco coming in the next 3 months or so. And maybe this personal encounters can build the political will that you were talking about and push a bottom-up effort to have these things commercialized and materialized.
And it's interesting, and we have, I think, guests who came in from Morocco today to this conference. So there you see everything connects, and you know, we see the pieces coming together. Mr. Ambassador, I want to ask you, we've been speaking a lot about the regional perspective here in the Middle East. If you could talk a bit about cooperations that have happened in Europe, maybe involving our region and maybe just more local, that we here in Israel and in Morocco and other countries in the region can learn from.
No, first of all, the Netherlands and Israel cooperate quite closely on environmental issues. There's a lot of exchange of information. We are really interested in a lot of innovations that come up here. But we also have our own innovations and solutions to share. So one thing that we talked about is how to deal with extreme weather events and huge amounts of rainwater when they fall. It doesn't all fall neatly into the Kinneret, so you need to have
as we saw just last week.
Exactly. So it can really flood. For example, Tel Aviv. The Tel Aviv area is really prone to flooding. So we have created in the Netherlands, together also with Germany and Switzerland, what we call the Room for the River approach, where you also have to work with nature. You can't do everything through technology. Some things just weather is a nature event, and you need to use the rivers and lakes to store rainwater and to make sure that it doesn't flood urban areas. So we exchanged with Israel on this as well to also make more room for the river, but it takes hard political choices because you can't build where water has to flow in extreme weather events, and you have to create infrastructure which costs money. Another one is coastal protection. The Netherlands is, as you know, for 70% under sea level, so we have a lot of expertise on protecting us against the sea. But Israel is also a threat with a rising Mediterranean, with a lot of coastal erosion in a very populated country. I'm really surprised that you don't pay more attention to coastal protection. I see every day pieces of the coast washing away. So we've also been exchanging on how to do that, but so far Israel has not yet been ready to invest the money that is needed to protect that land. So we continue that conversation. But these are just some of the examples where we cooperate and where we can learn from each other. And the other is on hydrogen. We have been investing a lot in the Netherlands in green hydrogen. We also believe that this region, with Israel as a hub, can be key in producing green hydrogen through solar energy. And we've been promoting cooperation on that, both with Israel but also with the countries around. And we would love to connect the dots, because for Europe's energy security, it's vital that regions like this make full benefit of what they have to offer. So we're also cooperating on that.
Specifically on the issue of the coastal erosion, if you can go to a little more detail, because it's something that Haaretz actually has covered quite a lot over the last year and even before, but some really interesting stories recently about this threat and what it means for Israel.
Sorry, which threat?
So I mean, from the Dutch perspective, what are steps that have been done that Israel could try to also emulate?
Well, I mean, one of the things, if you look at all the predictions, you and the rest of the region are going to suffer much more from increase of temperatures. And I see in how you build and how you deal with nature and the priorities that you set as a country, you're not preparing yourself well for this increase of temperature. Cities have no trees, buildings emit heat. I mean, there's lots of things. So that really needs to be a higher priority. And we're exchanging on that by promoting also other building. Not that we have all the knowledge, definitely not. I mean, we are also a very populated country with small territory. We know how difficult it is, but we want to work on these things together. And we wish, for more stability also at the political level, so we can cooperate more long-term, more strategically on these issues.
Yeah, that was, I think, an important warning for us, definitely. Guy, we heard from the ambassador about some of these risks and threats. Is there somewhere where you see a big opportunity coming that is, again, involves a regional perspective and perhaps something that will surprise us?
Yeah, so as the ambassador said, this region has a great potential to produce green hydrogen and, in general, green molecules, green ammonia, sustainable aviation fuel, because we have a vast of land which the options for living and agriculture is limited, but the radiation is great and there is a lot of space to install these renewable energy assets. We are developing the first green hydrogen plant in Israel with H2 Pro, which we also invested in that company in Yotveta.
Where is it going to be?
It will be in Yotveta.
Yotveta, basically in the Arava desert on the way to Eilat.
Yeah. Yeah. Right, and we hope to do many more of those. We met a lot of delegators at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, and it was a consensus among the leaders from the governments and the private sectors in companies and from companies from the region, let's say, that in order to our region to be prosperous and maintain peace, we have to be a major key in the energy transition towards sustainable energy in the world. And they all agreed this should be a team play, and we should collaborate. With no further elaboration, I can say that Doral has discussion and formed a lot of this connection, and I hope with some other regional players to do mutual projects. I hope in the future it will vast and we can disclose it. But we'll work
something for next year's conference, you're saying?
Bezrat Hashem.
Okay. We definitely will need that. Veronica, turning back to your sphere of the civil society and the NGOs, and your organization really works all over the region. Where do you see the impact and the role and maybe also the challenges for civil society organizations who are trying to promote cooperations and really lead to action? I mean, we hear the warnings, and how does civil society play into leading to action?
Thank you for the question. I think it plays a lot into what you said. I think it goes both ways. It's political will and kind of a political frame on the one hand, and then of course it's cooperation and kind of human-to-human interconnections. So what we try to do in this regional program of the Adenauer Foundation is we try to create platforms for exchange to exactly work on these types of where are the synergies, where could we work together, and to kind of create an understanding for all sides, because I think this is the basis if you then want to move to cooperation. So this is the one thing. And for us, it's always about bringing people to one table that otherwise probably wouldn't have sat at the same table, because I think it does make quite a big difference. And that also plays into our work with civil society. We always try to include civil society actors in our activities. A lot of it is by providing their expertise, because a lot of times civil society organizations do have their ear way closer to the ground than policymakers, than think tanks, than other actors. So this is one thing. And the second thing is also that we try to build capacities of civil society to take on exactly that role, to be able to communicate better, to know how to approach policymakers, to know how to better implement their programs. So the second aspect of this kind of aspect of capacity building. And maybe just because COP came up, something that we've recently developed is the role of youth within these kind of multilateral climate frameworks. There has been a bit more attention on it. There is a bit more room for youth at these multilateral events now. And we're also trying to promote that by allowing or supporting young people to participate in COP by providing them with capacity building before they go to, also enhance this role of youth more specifically from the civil society perspective.
And I assume one of the challenges is that in some of the countries in the region, civil society is weak and under threat. We hope that is not where Israel is headed, but it is the reality among some of our neighboring countries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, civil society, this whole issue of shrinking spaces is definitely touching the MENA region as well, very much so. But a lot of times it's about financing, it's about having the appropriate frame to work, it's about finding the support you need to actually move along with your projects, definitely.
Something to consider. Gideon, I want to turn back to you, and you spoke a bit earlier about going from, I would say, the immediate regional perspective to a much wider one that also includes Europe. Do you envision Israel having that kind of a role, I mean, small country, that kind of an impact in the process?
Well, the potential is there. The ability to implement largely depends on credibility. And first of all, we need to implement sustainable policies at home. And I think as Eitan highlighted earlier, we can hardly be sort of a light onto the nations if we're not implementing these issues and the finance ministry is not investing in the manner that we needed to invest. So that's first. Second, the bottom-up political will is indeed partially created by lots of public support. And like Veronica mentioned, the importance of bringing people together to understand that the climate crisis is a shared crisis for us all. And at Ecopeace, we've invested over these last 5 years cohorts of climate diplomats, creating young Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian climate diplomats, young professionals in the early part of their career, some of them here at Ben Gurion University, several of the Israeli climate diplomats here in the hall, meeting together with Palestinian and Jordanian colleagues to understand that we're all in the same boat and that we'll either sink or we'll continue to sail together.
Gideon, can I ask a quick question about that? When we see rising tensions, we talk about rising sea waters, but we also have rising tensions sometimes here in this land between Israel and Palestinians, like in these days when we see terror attacks and military operations and people killed on both sides, how does that impact this kind of cooperation?
So it has an impact, and we can actually see it, on this panel. I mean, last year we were easily able to bring panelists from other Arab states, and this year
we had a Palestinian speaker from the Palestinian Authority on the stage.
Exactly, and this year, there are repercussions to political decisions and to political policies, and we see a reluctance to publicly. So much of the climate diplomacy work that we're doing, either with young professionals or others, has to be out of the media because the broader political setting is not right. But then there are other issues of credibility that we also need to grapple with. We talk about the Middle East having vast desert areas and we can cooperate. Well, that's also not a given. To cooperate with our neighbors means discussions and building trust. To cooperate with Europe also requires building trust. And the current agreements that have been signed are still just agreements. When we look at the Project Prosperity Blue and Green. Implementation is still awaiting, and we're hoping that an agreement will be signed at COP, a purchase agreement to purchase, that Jordan will purchase water and Israel will purchase electricity. But that won't go forward if the political climate continues to deteriorate. We can't ignore the broader political climate. And if we are really taking climate resilience as an issue of national security, if the National Security Council of the Prime Minister's office quite rightly established a person to look at climate resilience as a security issue, then we need to integrate that into our broader political discussions. And if I have a moment, I want to highlight how interconnected we are. This last summer, for the first time in nearly 10 years, millions of Israelis were able to go back to the beaches of southern Israel, and millions of Palestinians in Gaza were able to go back to the beaches of Gaza and bathe in a sense of security that they weren't going to catch a disease. That happened because of cooperation between Israel and the Palestinians and the international community to build sewage treatment plants. Because before that, 108 million litres of sewage was leaving Gaza every day. And that's the message I want to highlight. If we don't cooperate, if one of our neighbours fail, the implications are directly on us. The desalination plant of Ashkelon was closing down intermittently, providing 15% of our drinking water. We are interconnected. Politicians speak of disengagement. Well, for the environment, we can never disengage. And that's where the political will needs to be established and understood.
Thank you for that. And I have to say, as a resident of southern Israel, I definitely connected to the beaches issue. It was quite a relief. We have about 8 minutes left, and 4 other speakers that I still want to turn to, which means just about 2 minutes or less, because I also have to say closing remarks. And so what I want to ask you, I'll start with you, Mr. Ambassador, as we conclude, to give one thing in the context of what we discussed today that you are very worried about, maybe keeps you up at night, but also one thing that brings you reason for optimism in the context of our discussion today.
No, a lot has been said about innovation, and indeed Israel has an amazing amount of incredible innovations that can really help solve some of the issues. And we bring a lot of them to the Netherlands. H2 Pro that you mentioned is also building a facility in the port of Amsterdam. But don't rely too much on innovation, because it also, you have to make hard choices, and we don't have to forget the real nature that we have to deal with. And I notice sometimes in Israel there's this tendency, we can innovate our way out of it. And I want to warn against that, because we tried it and it didn't work.
Even Startup Nation has its limits.
Exactly. I mean, hard choices have to be made, and you need to keep space, as I said, for water, but also for migratory birds, just places, to enjoy nature. We cannot just ignore the reality of the earth, and you cannot innovate out of, every problem.
Thank you for those words. Iris, I turn to you. Also, something that is a great reason for concern, but maybe also something that is gives us some reason for hope and optimism.
I think my concern is the lack of will. As you said, we are interdependent on our nearest neighbors, and if we don't collaborate with them, if we're not interdependent on each other, we are going down altogether. And we need to sit together and set joint goals for this area. And we need to develop small-scale pilot entrepreneurship that would build mutual trust between different parties, and we need to raise financial resources for that, and then we need to go on and we need to be regional. And I hope that maybe the rest of the world, which is not involved in the conflicts in this area, can help bring us together to the same table. You put us together, we'll take it from there. But we need to be sitting together because bottom line, and I don't know if that's pessimistic or optimistic, we may have our differences of opinions, we may have different views on how things should be done, but if we don't save the world from the climate issues, we will have no land to fight over.
I'll try to take the optimistic part out of that prediction. Guy, I'll turn the same question to you.
Yeah, so I think, and as I said, connection is being formed here in the region and globally. And some is being published and some is not. There's our investment I mentioned before, and another one we did with Saudi Aramco in an American company two months ago.
Well, that made headlines at the time.
Yeah. So I am optimistic of that, but I want to take the stage and encourage every organization, either governmental or corporate, to think we can collaborate together. From Israel, from the region, from all over the world, feel free to reach out. And for technologies companies or for teams who are just in the ideation stage, who think they can tackle and help us to tackle this climate challenge, to reach out. We can either be a trusted partner as investors or just to give ecosystem feedback, to host you as an alpha site or pilot site. We open and would love to hear from you. I think we're trying to tackle a very big challenge, and I think we can do it. But only together. Otherwise, it won't work.
Okay, thank you for that. Veronica, to you.
I think for me, what worries me is that we still have a lot of conversations where I feel the sense of urgency is missing, without falling into a panic about the climate crisis. But I feel like the urgency hasn't really reached all discussions that we have about climate. Obviously, this room feels the urgency and sees the urgency. Not every room
Better
does.
than nothing. We start in one room.
Yeah. So that worries me a bit. What gives me hope, though, is that we see a dynamic of more cooperation right now, and I think it's really important to build on that. And that may not be out of a passion for regional or international cooperation. That might just be out of necessity, but I'll take it, As long as the cooperation exists and gets us where we need to go, this is something that gives me hope.
Okay, definitely a good note to almost close on. Gideon, I'll give you the final word briefly,
Yes.
because we do have to conclude.
Ecopeace was established in 94, 28 years ago. And we all thought that peace had broken out. We were established at the time, straight after the peace treaty between Israel and Jordan, straight after the signing of the Oslo Accords between Israel and the PLO. And we were established because we were fearful that peace was going to be great between people, but it was not considering nature. That was the raison d'etre of Israel, of creating eco-peace. Now, why do I say that? There's tremendous euphoria, and it's important for the Abraham Accords as well, to have these broader agreements and the resilience and the cooperation they're going to create. But we can't take them for granted. Those similar agreements, if we don't also include the Palestinians and the Jordanians in our regional resilience, then those agreements also will not move forward. So I think the message that we can't take anything for granted. We're about to celebrate 75 years. We need to decide, where do we want to be? What do we want to do when we grow up? And when we grow up, we have to take climate resilience and the understanding that that requires cooperation, not out of a privilege, but out of a necessity. Thank you.
All right, so with that optimistic note, I want to thank our great panelists and really for a fascinating discussion. I think they definitely deserve the applause. Thank the audience for being with us, and hopefully we'll continue these discussions. There's a lot to talk about and a lot to do. So again, thank you very much.